Right now, we'll have the third session of the day, and let me call out the good names of the session chairmen, speakers, and the commentators and request them to join me on the stage. The title of the session is Islamic Crowdfunding, and more specifically, the opportunities and challenges in Islamic crowdfunding. So may I request Honorable Sheikh Professor Dr. Muhammad Al-Garri, member of the AAOIFI Board of Trustees and chairman and member of the Sharia supervisory boards of various IFIs from all over the world, to please join me on the stage. Sheikh Professor Dr. Muhammad Al-Garri. I just saw him a couple of minutes back, so I don't know where he is. Okay. Mr. Umar Munshi, he is the co-founder and managing director at Ethes Ventures, which is based in Malaysia. Please join me on the stage. Mr. Fahim Ahmed, CEO of IIRA, which is an Islamic rating agency. Mr. Khalid Saad, CEO of Bahrain's first ever as well as MENA's largest fintech platform known as the Bahrain Fintech Bay. And lastly, Ms. Yasmin Al-Sharaf, who is the head of fintech unit at the Central Bank of Bahrain. For this session also, we will have 1 hour, 30 minutes.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. First of all, I would like to thank you, AAOIFI and other sponsors, for inviting me to discuss a technology issue. I am being a rater. I will try to give my thoughts on this topic. Last year, I spoke on digital banking, and actually with the technology platforms now coming up, the rating agencies have to catch up on the new risks which are emanating from the technology platforms and new back offices, the technology is being used. My presentation is, I will start now looking into how the crowdfunding started and what is this platform. And then I will try to give you a kind of the horizon and the quantum of this platform being used around the global market. And then I will try to compare it, and then I will try to discuss some risks as far as the rating agency is concerned, that what could be the risks addressing this new platform. As you can see from my slide, that the concept of soliciting capital or raising funds is not very new. If you recall, if you look at the New York stock market, in 1792, actually under a tree, the exchange started, and there were 20 odd people who would solicit the fundraising into their capital or equity capital. So that is how the platform, any platform you talk about, whether it's a stock market, OTC over the counter, or maybe this crowdfunding platform, it's not very new. I mean, the concept is the same. And then after it was not very regulated in the New York market in 17th century. Then after the depression in 1930s, the regulators started regulating the practices of investments and trading. In 30s, the lot of restrictions came in from person-to-person investments, and then after the global crisis in 2008, there was an impetus in fintech. So like digital banking emerged, so the crowdfunding also emerged. UK, we have seen UK, China right now as we speak is major countries where this is happening. You know, in my view, the regulations somehow or the other are becoming lower. For example, if you look at London Stock Exchange, it's a very highly regulated and very big asset companies come and list themselves. Now, if you look at London, there is an AIM, alternate investment market, which has lowered its barriers and small companies can come and get themselves listed. I think the lower the barrier, the smaller the companies can come and raise equity or raise funds. But however, the caution is the regulations, the absence of regulations. So that is how this crowdfunding is supposed to be enabling SMEs and new startups to raise funds. However, in my opinion, SMEs are a kind of a regulated institutions, not very small, the medium and the large enterprises. I will come and discuss this issue. I have visited these Kickstarters, Indiegogo, Patreon, but these are all tech companies where they give a concept, very clear concept. You can have 3 views on this. You can give an advance for the product, which can come and deliver to you. You can raise funds. The investor wants to raise funds, so they become a debtor to you, and then you can have an equity partnership. So as far as the rating companies go, we try to rate the debt. We don't give opinion on equity funding. However, like in India, Bangladesh, there are regulations in place where the rating agency is asked even to give risk or the governance issue evaluation on the IPOs also. So the equity comes in the domain through the regulations for the rating agencies. So just keep that in mind for a while, and then I will try to maybe dilate more on this. If you look at, why is this not coming? Okay. In this slide, if you look at the total, this is the IFSB's report from where I could gather some numbers. The loan-based crowdfunding against investment-based crowdfunding. Look at the numbers. The loan-based crowdfunding is much more appealing because there is a debt element and the people expect that their debt and the capital could be returned. However, in equity, they are very cautious. They are cautious because the equity they can lose and there is no recourse to the for the equity payment they have made. However, if you look in USA, the reports, this is $31 billion. In the report, in USA, actually, there is an issue of semantics where P2P, how they define. In USA, the crowdfunding, the P2P also includes the business P2B also, meaning person to business. That is why I think this 31 billion from USA is highly inflated. Look at now, if you compare the total global debt market, it's about $100 trillion. The equity market is about $80 trillion. So that we are now looking at very small numbers, which are very, very small even to right now consider maybe they may increase over time. Now, going forward, the Sharia principles and crowdfunding, if you see, there is a saying that crowd madness versus crowd wisdom. If you go into 15th century, the people lost a lot of money into tulips, trading of tulips. And this cycle comes and goes, like the depression came in, and then you have seen the meltdown in 2008. So I think the crowd madness, and then the crowd wisdom comes in, then there is a little harness where the regulators become aware and they start putting in the rules and regulations. So I think we should be aware of crowdfunding right now because it's a new platform, and if there are failures, a domino effect on the failures, then the regulators would come and may have their foot into the door. However, the best thing for the crowdfunding is that there may be an electronic interaction between the fundraiser and the investor through WhatsApp or through maybe the emails. So it is transparent, and the person would feel secure rather than going into the stock market. He can get lost. Then the social solidarity dimension, because of the crowd. So then you can have a lot of interaction between the person who is raising the funds and the investors. However, if you look at the new platforms in OIC countries, Malaysia, Turkey, Morocco, Bahrain has come up, but they have put up in Bahrain, I was looking at the regulations, it is not crowdfunding, because they have stopped the retailers to apply for any investment into the crowdfunding platform in Bahrain at least. In Malaysia also, they have defined 3 categories of investors. So I think the retailers are being cautioned continuously, and there are many disclaimers on the website of the crowdfunding platform itself that it's a highly risky investment you are going to do, because it's a one-way street, because then you would not be able to liquidate. I will come on to that later on, how the rating world works and what are the rules and regulations. So in the OIC member countries, if you look at the number of non-charity based platforms are very small right now, and the small number of, there are very few to name. They are a little active, not much activity we have seen in OIC countries at least. The major consideration as a risk evaluator is the Sharia compliance confirmation, because there is no statement from any Sharia scholar, or like in the real world for the banking, there is a central Sharia board which can give you Sharia fatwa or his opinion on these investments, because these are very small investments. Now look at the next 5 areas. The risk profile of the funding providers and the seekers, particularly the seeker, and then the nature of contract of the liabilities and guidelines, then the disclosure of guidelines for local and cross-border seekers. This is very important. And then mechanism of post-investment surveillance. These are very structured rules and regulations for rating agencies. If you get into a sukuk or an equity or in a bond where the third-party opinion from a rating agency is known, and the risk benchmark through their symbols like A+, A-, BBB is known to the investors. Here, it's a new phenomena. There is no risk rating, no risk benchmarking on these platforms at least, because if the platform starts rating, then it may attract the liability. So I think there is a caution on this, at least for my sake. When I visited these websites, I have seen the website in Malaysia where they are soliciting equity partnership also, and they have a very big disclaimer on their website. Then the liquidity issue. Through these platforms, you cannot liquidate your investment. That is the biggest. It means that you have to remain with the issuer as a partner or as a debtor continuously throughout the horizon period. It may be 5 years, 10 years. So that's the biggest risk for the investors here. That is why maybe in Bahrain, rules and regulations provide a capping on the investment by individual. So it cannot be more than its 10% worth. He cannot invest more than 10% of his worth, and within 1 year. And then, of course, rating agencies have come out of credit analysis also, like for IPOs I mentioned in India, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. Any company which solicits public money has to be rated. So I think these platforms, if they operate into these bigger countries where there are a lot of retail population. So I think then the regulations have to be very clear whether if they're soliciting from public money, then they have to have a third-party opinion. For example, non-credit analysis like ESG, the environment, social governance, it has a third-party evaluator right now. You cannot issue, or the companies which are confirming that they adhere to ESG benchmarks, they have to get a third-party opinion so that they can come into the indexes, the sustainability indexes. So I think, there are pros and cons, but as we move along, I'm sure, and in my experience as a rating agency, that this will be regulated. Unless it is regulated very closely, it may not get that steam, or it may not impact the alternate capital markets which it envisages to come up with. So that was my submission, and maybe during the course of my... by the way, in my last year's presentation, I had talked about digital banking. Maybe there are 3 areas which the crowdfunding is maybe not grappling right now. The Electronic Transaction Act, the Personal Data Protection Law, and the cyber security. I have not seen these 3 regulations on any of these big platforms where they refer to the Privacy Acts and the Cybercrime Acts. So I think this is also an area where we have to look into before we invest into these platforms.
Fine.
Thank you very much.
Finished? Thank you very much. I hope you have introduced yourself. Your name, because Fahim Ahmed. Thank you very much.
Islamic International.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much, Brother Fahim. And firstly, I'd like to apologize for, although I'm the chairman, I was the last to come to the podium because I had to meet these Russians, brothers from Russia, who have really an exceptional project. I urge everyone to listen to them this evening, inshallah. Now we move to the second speaker, Brother Omar Munshi. And the first time I listened to Brother Munshi was in Kuala Lumpur about 3-4 years ago, and he was very much involved in crowdfunding. Now he reached a point where we can call him the Sheikh of crowdfunding. Please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Is it possible to make it PDF on Adobe Reader instead of this? Is it? No? Okay, fine. So you help me to adjust, yeah? Okay, Bismillah. Right, I have 15 minutes to talk about the opportunities and challenges for crowdfunding in Islamic finance or Islamic crowdfunding. But I decided to focus on only opportunities because the challenge to me is the challenge of inertia and adoption. Adoption in the Muslim world is too slow, it is lagging behind, and we are missing out. So that's why I chose to focus on opportunities, so that inshallah this will help to trigger more momentum and trigger more action. Yeah? Okay. Right. So very quickly, to add on to the previous speaker's points, what is crowdfunding? Sometimes I assume people know, but when I speak in general randomly, it is still a concept that is not fully understood by many people. And I would say that it is a concept that continues to evolve as well. But to try and summarize it, crowdfunding is a platform that matches projects or fundraisers, people who need funds or who look for funds, companies, businesses, even individuals, to fund providers or investors or donors or contributors. Another way of putting it is, all of you are familiar with e-commerce. It matches buyers and sellers. It matches products. Crowdfunding is similar. It's a platform that matches projects. All right? So it can be implemented in many different things, many different ways, different sectors, different purposes, different contexts, and different users. But today, of course, the focus will be on investment crowdfunding, right? And the middle paragraph here is something that I would like you to focus on for a while. In theory, platforms can raise funds from almost any source and fund almost any project, in theory. It depends on regulations, it depends on the platform itself, and so on. But in theory, this is a very, very nimble model and instrument that we need to use for Islamic finance, inshallah. And the last point is related, of course, to Islamic finance, where the funds flow direct. The funds flow to the projects directly, and it goes into the real world. Right? It doesn't go to an intermediary. The platform is just a facilitator or a matchmaker. All right, this thing doesn't want to work with me. Can you help? Next slide, please. Guys? Okay. Now, investment crowdfunding, there are two types, I would say, and a lot of hybrids in between. This is based on definitions by most regulators. Yeah? And sometimes a particular crowdfunding model does not really fit into either of this. But the key differentiation is for P2P financing, it is considered debt-based or financing-based, meaning it is not equity-based. All right? So in the accounting books, it's put as a debt or liability. So any kind of investment crowdfunding that does not involve equity currently falls into P2P or peer-to-peer financing. And on the other side, equity crowdfunding is where companies go onto platforms and issue or sell shares to the public. It's like a mini IPO. Right? So both are very different in their nature, but essentially these are the two main forms of crowdfunding that exist today. Right. Now I'll touch on a little bit of the growth of crowdfunding, then I'll go into some of the impact of crowdfunding. And the last part, very quickly, I'll touch on what we have done and what we hope to do, inshallah. But these figures here are really, really phenomenal, especially for Indonesia. This is P2P financing. Indonesia started regulating this about 3 years ago. And this year, to date, this is outdated, right now, Indonesia has funded 6.5 billion US dollars have gone through platforms in Indonesia. Right here you see is 2 billion as of January this year, and since then it has more than doubled. Right? So let's go on to the actual implication or the impact of crowdfunding in the real world. What are our problems? Our problem is that these things are broken. Direct investment is broken. Broken, what I mean by broken, especially in emerging nations, when people want to invest or when small businesses look for investors, they have not many sources. The banks and the incumbents generally do not want to lend to them. So what happens is they borrow or they get investment from family, friends, and so on. And there's a lack of proper intelligence or facilitation. So this is what I mean by broken. And of course, if you talk about charity, zakat, waqaf, sadaqah, all these things in the Muslim world, as we all know, is very much not optimum. Right? So this is where we believe, and it's a big statement, but crowdfunding is the future of Islamic finance, not on its own, as part of the system that is Islamic finance today, with Islamic banking, Islamic capital markets. Crowdfunding has a very, very significant role to play as the nucleus, as the platform, as the facilitator that matches the different sides. All right? So what's the key difference? Let me highlight a few points. Sorry. Okay. Key difference here is that the money moves based on what people want. Not stakeholders, not banks, not shareholders. What people want, right? And that is very, very important. We are giving the power of money back to the people. Secondly, there are mechanisms embedded in the platform to ensure transparency, accountability. Information has to be shown, tracking has to be done. And the last point is, with these two coming in, inshallah, there'll be greater flows, more effective existing flows, as well as activating new funds. Okay, I'll share with you a little bit more, some examples later on. Now, what's the benefit and application for Islamic finance? huge potential. These are a few ideas. One is, of course, for charity, for zakat, waqaf, and sedekah. We have a platform, a small platform that is still young called globalsedekah.com, and that's moving very nicely. Secondly, we can fund the underserved, and this is why it's growing so fast in Indonesia. And of course, the current growth today is in consumer, SME, and property. Right? Consumer loans, especially in Indonesia, crowdfunding P2P consumer loans is the bulk of the 6.5 billion in Indonesia, which may not necessarily be good. It's basically a lot of China, originated from China platforms coming to Indonesia to lend money to low-income people. So that's definitely not good, but there's also a lot of productive crowdfunding happening in Indonesia and in many other countries. What about investors? The benefits for investors is, firstly, the minimums are low. Right? Almost anyone can invest as long as you have some excess cash and you can diversify. The big trend today is institutional funds going to crowdfunding platforms, partnering with crowdfunding platforms, and aggregating their investment into many projects, right? So that you can diversify. Now, secondly, for investors, you know where your money is going and the impact of that money. And of course, the last point, which is not yet ideal today, but technology will eventually make it very ideal, is you can easily invest across the world, across borders, right? So these are three key points. For fundraisers, I think these are some very obvious points. Typically, it's faster, it's flexible, you engage with the public, you get awareness, you get publicity, you get validation, and at the same time, you can leverage on your own community, right? Okay, so these are three of the main points that I want to highlight for fundraisers, investors, and for Islamic finance in general. And the last part, or the next portion of my presentation in about 5 minutes, I will show you some examples of what we've done so that you have an idea of how this can be implemented. Right? So the company name is Ethis. Ethis is a combination of ethical and Islamic. And our mission is to drive crowdfunding, basically. Right? I'll skip a little bit. And I want to show you this. So this is our proof of concept. What we've managed to do is we have brought investment from around the world to go to Indonesia, to invest in projects in Indonesia for social housing. These are impact investments. That means you make profit. Okay? Sorry. That means you invest to help property developers build houses for low-income people, supported by a government program that handles the mortgage or the home financing, Islamic, and there's also conventional. Of course, we only work with the Islamic. And this is what we've managed to do, alhamdulillah, at a very lean setup before there were licenses available. To date, we have done about 1,300 investments from all around the world through our platform, and almost all of them are investing in Indonesia for the first time. So this is not a huge number, but it's a significant proof of concept to show that there is this unique new behavior of people investing from across the world into Indonesia without going there, without meeting us, based purely on what they see online. And today, increasingly, you can see half is from Singapore because we started in Singapore. But this year especially, a lot of funds have come from the Middle East and from Europe. Based on name, they look like Muslims, majority Muslims. Of course, they are non-Muslims as well. Right? So these are some of our plans right now, inshallah. We look to focus on Indonesia, to set up in different finance hubs for Islamic finance, and also to enter new regions. Alhamdulillah, we received a license in Malaysia just recently. In Dubai, we got an approval also recently. And alhamdulillah, just last week, we got an approval from Indonesia, from the Financial Services Authority. So right now, we have 3 licenses in 3 countries. And inshallah, talking to my friends here from the Bahrain FinTech Bay and the Central Bank to do something in Bahrain as well, inshallah. Right? Because we were one of the pioneers, we got some awards in the past, grants and so on, alhamdulillah, good support. So very quickly, this is our leadership, myself and Ronald, we are entrepreneurs. Dato' Razif is from SME Bank Malaysia. We have a group of active advisors and on our Shura board. right? Some are from this part of the world as well. And before I end, I want to focus on this a little bit. This alludes to the earlier session talking about blockchain. Now, I agree with some of the points stated during the blockchain session and also disagree with some. And it's always good to have contrarian views. And I want to jump to version 3, which is smart contracts and tokenized securities. In my opinion, to go into fintech or to go into new businesses related to technology, you don't really need to be a computer scientist or to understand how to code. I don't know how to code at all, right? I'm an entrepreneur who figured out how to use technology for my business. So understanding the impact is more important. Now, how are we using blockchain? Firstly, smart contracts, the topic of the earlier discussion. If well implemented, smart contracts can overcome many things, even becoming an escrow in itself. And I think more importantly is to tokenize assets and securities. This makes it tradable, which then makes it liquid, right? So this is what we're working on, inshallah, sometime middle of next year. I think I'm at the end of my presentation. If you're interested to know more, go to ethis.co, ethis.co. We have a few platforms live and running, inshallah, and many more coming up. Connect with me on LinkedIn and hope to speak to you after this and to get questions from you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Brother Manshi. Now we are finished with the speakers, and I'm going to give the floor to the commentators. But before I do that, I'd like to say something, of course, without abusing my position as chairman. I'd like to simplify things. Human societies are divided into two groups. One has more financial resources than it needs, and the other needs more financial resources than it has. And I'm not talking about the poor and the rich, no, I'm talking only about the rich, the savers and the investors. And this is since time immemorial. Societies are always like this, today, tomorrow, and yesterday, etc., etc. And all the financial innovation, financial institutions have one main function, is to try to move the savings to the other side where they can be utilized in investment, in consumption, in charity, etc. In the beginning, investors can reach out directly to savers. But then things got complicated. Loss of trust, high risk, monitoring cost. Then banks came as an intermediary where they can take the risk of the investors and they can develop ways and means to manage risk and to reduce the cost of monitoring and receive the savings from the savers. But then, as an intermediary, they turned out to be not very feasible for the savers, nor the investors. People try to invent stock markets where people can directly reach out to each other. But then the innovation did not stop there. They kept innovating new things. Crowdfunding is again going back to where those who need the funding can reach out directly to savers. So in a way, you can say there is nothing new in crowdfunding. This is partially true. The thing that is new in crowdfunding is two parts. One, the platform. Now they were able to harness technology to really become a platform where the two parties can directly exchange with each other at a very efficient way. And secondly, by engaging a large number of people, risk is reduced tremendously. So crowdfunding, in a way, it is going back to the original model of the two savers and investors can reach out to each other. But the new thing is technology and reducing the risk by involving a large number of people. Now we open the floor to the commentators, and We start with His Excellency, Mr. Khalid Saad, CEO of Bahrain TechPay.
Thank you, gentlemen, obviously, for the presentation, and Sheikh for the introduction. I think, as you rightly mentioned, we're going back to the basics of what was being done before in terms of people pooling in their assets or capital into assets. And I think this is an opportune time where crowdfunding has picked up significantly in especially Western markets, where we've seen companies that have struggled to raise capital, especially when they've got some good products and services, have now actually gone to the crowd and have been successfully funded and have scaled up big time. I think this also has helped bridge a significant gap in SME funding, or what is known as SME. Most financial institutions say that they're actually supporting SMEs in terms of funding, but the reality is that there's very little capital that's actually flowed into it, especially if you don't have, let's say, 3 years audited financial statements and whatnot. And so crowdfunding has, I think, unlocked an opportunity where vetted companies and assets could actually be offered to the crowd. I think the other thing which is important is the point that was mentioned was the technology or the platform around it. And I think for the first time, if, let's say, I take an example of Ethos and operating, let's say, in Malaysia or in Indonesia, for investors in this part of the world to actually participate in supporting charitable initiatives or, up and rising assets. And I think that cross-border flow has significant potential. I think if we move to the point of where Ethos wants to head in terms of APIs, tokenization and smart contracts, I think that's absolutely the next phase. And I think for me, tokenization excites me a lot because I think that will fundamentally change Islamic finance and significantly grow the investable universe. And I think tokenizing assets and unlocking opportunities that were not existent before and offering these to the crowd will change investments forever. And I think executing it also through smart contracts will significantly not only lower costs, but streamline the operations. So I see that as a big opportunity. There's obviously a gap in the region in terms of crowdfunding. There are now some crowdfunding platforms that are live, and there's been significant interest and also there are good returns in terms of investing in there. So I think having the right governance model around it is key. I think in an era where we are embarking on, which is the open banking era, having that API infrastructure and offering clients the opportunity to invest in through crowdfunding channels will not only enhance the customer experience, but could also potentially enhance the returns for the customer and ultimately the offering of these financial institutions. So I think crowdfunding has significant potential for the Islamic finance world. And I think we're at that stage now where more and more countries and jurisdictions are realizing that potential. At the same time, the emergence of tokenization is also going to take this to the next level. So I think we're at that juncture where things are about to take off.
Thank you very much. And the last commentator is Ms. Yasmin Al-Sharif, Head FinTech and Innovation Unit in the Central Bank of Bahrain. Please.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, gentlemen. I actually agree with what Khalid said and what both gentlemen that presented said during their presentations. Just speaking of the history of crowdfunding, I know Mr. Fahim, you touched upon this during your presentation. The whole concept of having alternative finance or crowdfunding is not something really new. It dates back 100 years back. I read something very interesting actually that said that the concept of alternative finance or crowdfunding first started back in the 1700s, believe it or not. It was initiated in Ireland by an Irishman by the surname of Swift. He came up with the concept of having an Irish fund loan, which was used to fund poor families in rural areas, providing them with microfinancing, micro-lending. The loan sizes were extremely tiny, ranging from 5 to 10 pounds. Now, the reason of having crowdfunding or alternative finance became popular due to a reason. It's because, as Khalid mentioned, there is obviously a funding gap that is not being catered to by the traditional banking model. Banks don't really serve SMEs or small investors. So there was this need that sparked the demand for moving towards a more availing more alternative kind of finance model. Now, speaking of the different models of crowdfunding, there are of course the social models and the commercial models. Social in terms of charities, for example, donations. When it comes to the commercial models, there are two different significant models currently existing, and those are either financing or equity-based, both of which are completely regulated in the Kingdom of Bahrain, and we are considered as one of the first regulators in the region to issue regulations for crowdfunding. I'll just provide you with an overview of our regulations in a minute. But what I wanted to say is that although crowdfunding has been around for hundreds of years ago, I think that it gained more popularity recently in our day and age because of the internet from one end and because of technology, making these crowdfunding or financing platforms available to investors around the world to be interconnected, to raise funding for projects from investors from around the world. In the Kingdom of Bahrain, in 2017, we took the initiative to introduce regulations on crowdfunding. And our regulations cater to both Sharia compliant as well as conventional crowdfunding models, and they cover both equity and financing-based crowdfunding models. Now, when we speak of crowdfunding, of course, because there is the lack of the regulated intermediary, which is the bank, there is always the risk of fraud, which is very prevalent. And the whole model of crowdfunding depends on total trust. So an important question for us probably to think about is thinking of a mechanism on trying to solve this, the challenge or the potential risk of fraud in the alternative crowdfunding platform model. Without disrupting the whole concept of crowdfunding. For example, one of the things that we might think of, and I think Mr. Fahim also covered this in his presentation, we might think of introducing a kind of a credit rating agency, just specifically for crowdfunding. But this may work and it may not work. It may not work because at the end of the day, it will go beyond that whole peer-to-peer concept and defeating the whole concept of crowdfunding in the first place. In Bahrain, we are dealing with limiting the risks that may arise of potential frauds through crowdfunding by imposing limitations and thresholds on all the amounts that can be raised through both financing as well as equity-based crowdfunding. For example, when it comes to financing-based crowdfunding, we place a limit on raising no more than 500,000 Bahraini dinars worth per borrower during a period of 1 year, regardless, in aggregate, regardless of the number of projects that that borrower is raising funding for or seeking funding for through the crowdfunding platform. And we have specified the tenor of the loan to be held at 5 years. Again, when it comes to equity-based crowdfunding, we placed thresholds depending on the different type of the equity model, because we've got the regular equity model and then we've got the real estate-based equity model. In terms of real estate projects, we have placed a threshold of, again, 500,000 per project in aggregate during a period of 1 year. For all other equity-based crowdfunding businesses, we've placed a threshold of 250,000 Bahraini dinars. To ensure more, let's say, security within the financial system and to protect investors more, we've also placed a threshold on the types of investors and lenders that can engage in funding activities through crowdfunding platforms. And by doing so, we've specified that such investors can only be, they must meet our definitions of accredited or expert investors according to the CBB's definition, thereby protecting the regular retail, less sophisticated investors. And I know that Mr. Fahim, you've raised this point during your presentation. You said that when it comes to retail crowdfunding platforms that don't really involve retail investors, that is not really essentially the concept of crowdfunding because we're eliminating the retail investors. Well, in Bahrain, what we thought is, initially to start off with, we wanted to put that limitation in place to test it out and to safeguard the financial system. And then maybe going forward, we may think of removing this, this threshold in the future. But for the time being, it's just open for accredited and expert investors. I had a few questions, Mr. Umar, if you don't mind, regarding your presentation. First of all, you mentioned that you were licensed in Indonesia as a crowdfunding platform. Can you just talk to us a little bit about any challenges that you may have faced during setting up your startup, your crowdfunding platform, in terms of regulations?
Can we keep the question for the Q&A session, please? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, there was another question. You also mentioned that you were, I think, arranging for a project that is government-backed, for a real estate project. If you can just talk to us 2 minutes and give us more information on that project as well. So I think there's huge potential overall for crowdfunding, and specifically when it comes to Sharia-compliant financing models going forward.
Thank you very much. Let's now move to the question and answer session. But before we do that, and I'd like to say something about a point that nobody touched upon in relation to crowdfunding. In this area of the world, unfortunately, we are very wary, very suspicious of any organization collecting money from people because of experience where these things can sometimes trust be abused and money collected from people can be used for bad deeds. So we put a lot of hurdles and a lot of scrutiny they have to go through before they can set up a platform for crowdfunding. Crowdfunding has to be very efficient. I was reading that at one time in the United States, where one policeman accidentally, by mistake, killed somebody, and it became a very social issue covered by all the news media, etc. Before the end of the day, a platform for crowdfunding to collect money to defend this policeman was set up, and in 24 hours they collected so much funds to hire the best of lawyers to defend. This is where crowdfunding can work best, very fast, where it seizes the moment to finance a project, not a company or an institution, but to finance a project. So let us start the question and answers, and apparently the first questions we are going to address is that of Ms. Yasmin. So please start your questions. تبغى تسأل؟ لا الأخت ياسمين. Please.
I just wanted to ask regarding if you faced any challenges in setting up your crowdfunding platform in Indonesia. That's the first question. The second question was if you can just give us an overview of the government-backed real estate development project that's being funded through your platform.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Yahya. Keep the question, don't answer now. Okay. Please. Anybody has a question? Yes, please. صوتك جهوري تكلم. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other question, please? Yes.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Rizki. I'm from University College of Bahrain. By the way, I'm from Indonesia. So this question is specifically addressed to Mr. Umar Munshi. I have two questions here. As you say, that 98% of your project and the ETIS is direct to the Indonesian affordable housing. So could you please elaborate more about the impact of the housing financing? What is going on in Indonesia? What is the development and impact on the housing development in Indonesia? This is the first question. The second question, I make a note that you see 6.5 billion US dollar, yeah, in Indonesia is recorded as the amount of the peer-to-peer financing. Am I right? Right. However, there was a case like in the Kickstarter.com, GoFund, crowdfunding, whereby the fraudulent case with the amount of 800,000 US dollar was disappeared. Right. So my questions, how the equity crowdfunding platform, yeah, can ascertain or ensure the security, yeah, the fund of their from the fundraisers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Abdurrahman Al-Hussain from the Capital Market Authority in Syria. My question is I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment. I'm just worried about the targeted investors in crowdfunding, as crowdfunding normally is targeted towards small and medium businesses, which are not capable of having continuous obligation, disclosures, and good governance of the business, while big corporates, sovereigns go directly to banks. So I think there is a huge mismatch between the risk profile of the investor and the borrower in the crowdfunding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other question, please? Okay, no more questions. So I open the floor for the panel to answer the questions and to give any further comments on any issue.
Maybe I will just...
It's not working.
I will just answer this. This is a very important question of USA regulations, where the gentleman asked about the prospectus. I have researched, by the way, on the USA, the Kickstarters and the other 5, and then I went on to the Malaysian sites, because it's my interest as a rating agency to see how the funding is being utilized and what are the risks. In some of the instances in USA, I have seen some kind of a risk analysis, but the onus or the liability is not assumed by the platform. Kickstarter does not assume any responsibility if you are referring to the USA. However, the prospectus in Bahrain law, they have a statement from the issuer that he has to, it's a format they have to fill in for the kind of information. However, it may not be very elaborate, But then this gentleman, like he spoke about the SMEs, I think we should remove SMEs, M from SME. It should not be even small because they are regulated. What we are talking about micro enterprises. I think the crowdfunding, the regulator should specify that they exclude SME because they are companies. They are regulated. They have the audited accounts, the requirement. For the micro enterprises, maybe I can believe that micro enterprises, as I mentioned, that the crowd can come and support them. But then still, if this picks up, we are talking about very small amounts right now. If you go beyond $200, $300 million on the total amount, then it becomes significant and the regulators have a duty to regulate it. So that would be my submission actually. Yeah. I think there is no prospectus as per se. Oh, in Malaysia, do you have a prospectus or not? Yeah. Okay.
The only way in the United States I know of to raise funds is a Reg A, which is money from sophisticated investors with an income level of at least $2 million and who are sophisticated with a fund. But we cannot go out and raise funds on the market like this except for charitable purposes. And that should be well defined. Maybe I'm misinformed. Please let me know.
Okay.
Can I just answer that question? Actually, in Bahrain, we do impose thresholds on the types of investors, as I mentioned, that can participate in providing funding through crowdfunding platforms. And those are just limited to expert and accredited investors as per our definitions, right? Exactly. But what...
Please explain what accredited.
Sure. So according to our definitions, an accredited investor is an investor with a total net worth of not less than $1 million US. Expert investors are investors with a total net worth of not less than 100,000 US. And
Income and assets.
exactly, a total net worth. Yeah. In addition to that, actually in Bahrain, we have decided not to enable retail financing to take place through crowdfunding and to limit it to SMEs, to private companies. And we believe that when it comes to issuing retail loans through crowdfunding, there are more risks associated with that, so we've limited it to just SMEs. And we do impose mandatory regulations on the crowdfunding operator, platform operator, that he must ensure that everything, all the transactions, all the businesses that are listed on the platform must be transparent. There should be enough information for investors on the platform. It should be fair trading in terms of the fees, in terms of the interests. Everything should be out there and clear for the investors. In addition to that, investors must be informed and they are required to sign acknowledgement kind of forms, acknowledging that they do realize the risks associated with such investments, but they take full responsibility in participating in such investments.
Thank you very much. Just a minute. My thing is, this is not working. Unfortunately, although I do not profess to be an expert, but it appears that we are mixing up things. Yani, a company that is regulated and they have their own legal status as a company, regardless of the size, is not. This is not the client for crowdfunding. Therefore, crowdfunding is for a project. For a project, not to finance a company. That's what I think maybe I stand to be corrected, of course. So please, the panelists, to continue answering the questions. Okay.
All right. Okay. There were a few questions from earlier on that I want to touch on before I get to these recent questions. So the first few questions from Yasmin was on the Indonesian experience, and I'd like to touch on that a little bit. So when we started in Singapore in 2014, it was essentially out of a need for the Muslim community to have something to invest in. We had no Islamic investments in Singapore at that time, none that were accessible to the masses. So with some friends, we formed an investment club to invest informally as a group. And in 2016, we went online, and then we became a crowdfunding platform, which opened up to more people outside of our private circles. Now, when we started in Singapore, there were no regulations yet. And we sent some missions to the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and they did not object or they did not tell us to stop. So we operated in a gray area or unregulated zone. Essentially, we did not touch the monies. Monies from investors went straight to the project in Indonesia. So that's how we started. It was challenging in many aspects. Firstly, the property developers in Indonesia did not understand the nature of our service. So when I remember when I went to meet them and I said, I like the project and everything is recommended by someone trustworthy, good track record and so on. And I told them, okay, we can potentially, we did our screening and we said potentially we can raise $200,000 for this. And they said, when? And I said, I don't know. It depends on the crowd. And they said, how much money do you think you can get? 200,000? Do you think you can get 300,000? And I said, I don't know. It depends on the crowd. And they're like, what kind of bank are you? You don't have money. You don't know when you can give the money, right? So they were very confused. And I told them, basically, we are pulling in investors. You are sharing your opportunity to the world, and the world decides. You may not get the money. Yeah, so that was a little bit tough at the start on the project side. Now, on the investor side, and this is something that was mentioned a few times, investors, especially small investors, typically do not understand the risk. No matter how much we tell them the risks are high, they are looking at getting returns. They're looking at the excitement of the deal. They're looking at their neighbor investing, and they also want to invest. And I would say, based on experience, a large proportion of small investors do not understand what they're doing, and they're not savvy enough at this point to invest in crowdfunding. That is the reality of our experience, right? So those are some points I wanted to share. And that's why we were very happy in Indonesia when we found this government-backed program. And that's the second question, where the government provides support to banks, Islamic and conventional, to give subsidized home financing for low-income individuals or households. And because of that, there's now an opportunity for poor people to buy houses. And developers are given quotas and given incentives to build these houses. So because of the government's involvement, where a lot of things are fixed, the selling price is fixed in different regions, the criteria is fixed, everything is fixed. So it became very clean and very easy for us to onboard and to screen and to vet and to feature projects like this to the world, right? So Alhamdulillah, I think this combines to the other point from the Saudi regulator just now, where SMEs are high risk, but what crowdfunding can and needs to do is to look for those gaps and fill those gaps. And how we fill those gaps properly is with intelligence and data. In the long run, a crowdfunding platform needs to be able to get the data it needs to be able to provide high quality projects from big or small. In Indonesia, there are some crowdfunding platforms or P2P platforms that fund micro enterprises, small amounts, $100, $200, $500. And I can share one example. This is a consumer loan platform. They call themselves a data analytics company that's doing crowdfunding. So when they started, they charged incredibly high rates. At that time, it was not regulated. They charged 1% a day, pure riba, right? Obviously haram. 1% a day, uncollateralized loans to Indonesians. Anybody goes online, put in your information, connect to your social media platform, your profile, and you get money in your account in 2 hours. So obviously a lot of people went for that, right? 1% a day, that was the interest rates. So what happened? Obviously 70% did not pay the money back. But from the 30% who did pay back, I think they covered their capital in the end, right? But what happened after that is they got data, they got intelligence, and they became smarter and better at screening borrowers. And right now, their default rate has gone down. Of course, their interest rates is lower. Their default rate has gone down significantly. I think it's only 10% right now for pure uncollateralized loans to low-income people. So my point is, I mean, that's a bad example because it's pure riba loan. But when it comes to business, it's the same thing. It's about data. Now, in Malaysia, we have a license now. And what we do is we look for people or platforms with data on borrowers. Right? Banks can do that as well, but they're not, and I don't know why. So we do it, right? And as long as we have sufficient data to make an informed, process, and then share that process to the crowd, then the crowd can choose to take up the risk. Yeah. In the end, it's about trust. I think somebody mentioned that crowdfunding platform is based on trust. I think you mentioned it just now, and how well the projects do on our platform decides on our future. Will we survive or not? If projects keep failing and there are fraudulent projects on the platform, then the platform is not going to survive, right? It's not going to grow. Yeah. So I think that I've covered most of the questions. One question about the US. I think US has very developed regulations on crowdfunding. I believe it's quite complicated. And when it comes to prospectus, in most jurisdictions from that I'm aware of, there is no specific requirement. It's still up to the platforms to set their own standard in that sense. Right? In Indonesia and Malaysia, the approach was very different because Indonesia, the industry is so big and they need to regulate it out of necessity. So the process was incredibly tedious. They checked every single thing. We met the regulators maybe 30, 40 times. They visited us numerous times. Whereas in Malaysia, it was more of self-declarations and coming out with our own rule book that they felt comfortable with. Yeah. So I think every country, every platform, every experience is different. And the benefit of jurisdictions like Bahrain is that they, I assume, learned a lot from the experiences of others, the mistakes of others. No. We are a platform. When projects come to us, we put it on the platform. Okay. All right. Sure. So the question is about the investors maybe the rest did not hear, I'll repeat. The question is about how we present the information on our platform, right? So firstly, what we do is bridging finance, the projects on our platform. You can go to ethis.co, is bridging finance or mezzanine finance for property developments in Indonesia, all right? So based on the information that we gather and verify, we place it on the platform for you to read and for you to understand. We give a lot of information from the developer. You can download the PDF as well, and then you can decide. So what is stated there is a projected time frame, typically 12 to 15 months, and projected returns, typically in that period of time, 13 to 15%, right? And this is based on the outcome of the project.
Sorry, can I just jump in for
No, it is working.
It's working, I think. I think it's the same one. Yeah.
It depends on the question.
Just to clarify, you raised the issue, or you asked him on what does he include in the prospectus. As a crowdfunding platform operator, his responsibility is not to issue a prospectus to investors. As a crowdfunding platform operator, his only responsibility is to act as an intermediary, bringing together investors or financiers with those SMEs that are requiring lending, right? That doesn't mean that the platform operator is not in charge of undertaking due diligence on both the investors and those seeking funding. However, it is not the platform operator's responsibility to produce prospectus. I just wanted to clarify that out in case anyone has a wrong misconception of how a crowdfunding platform works and what the responsibilities of the crowdfunding platform operator is really should be.
Thank you very much. I think maybe we can continue after the session because apparently a lot of discussion needs to be done to clarify things later on. Any other question, please? Yes.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dr. Muhammad Salim, University of Bahrain. I was listening very passionately. If 1% interested per day, then it will be 365% interest rate. And that exceeded the Jahiliyyah interest rate. In a state, central bank just can give Qard Hasan. If central bank of Indonesia, if they give Qard Hasan, no need for subsidies to give interest to other Hasan crowdfunding.
No, I don't know. Do you have any reaction? No. Any other question, please? Yes, please. Please do.
This gentleman here. If you look at Akhuwat, there is a project where a donation, it is one of the largest microfinance company globally. Akhuwat, you must visit that. So they take zakat, they have full disclosures, they have audited accounts, and they give zakat and khairat and other donations to the education sector. So please visit. There is a reference of Akhuwat in IFSB report also, by the way.
Thank you. Okay. All right. At the end of this session, I'd like to thank our speakers and our commentators, and of course, I thank all of you. And let it go in the record. This is the session that ended before time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.